The Georgia sun was merciless, striking the earth of Fort Benning like a hammer on iron. The firing range buzzed with the chaotic energy of new recruits. Boots scuffed the dusty ground, and the scent of gun oil and sweat hung heavy in the air. A dozen young men and women fidgeted nervously behind their rifles, shouting jokes, boasting about skills they had yet to prove. Among them, one figure moved with a calm precision that made her stand out without anyone noticing. Yet, Private Emma Harlow adjusted the strap of her M24 sniper rifle, feeling its weight settle comfortably against her shoulder. The weapon was familiar, not just a tool, but an extension of herself, honed through countless hours of practice, discipline, and silent observation. Her hands moved with ease as she checked the scope, traced the barrel, and lined up the stock. Every movement was deliberate. She was small, unassuming, almost fragile in appearance, with a soft frame that made the rugged, muscular soldiers around her underestimate her immediately. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a tight braid, and her eyes, a piercing, calculating hazel, scanned the range with the patience of a predator. Sergeant Blake, a burly, no-nonsense instructor with decades of field experience, noticed her from across the line. He was used to rookies fumbling, bragging, and panicking under the pressure of live fire. This one, however, was different. Her posture was unnervingly straight, her focus unwavering. He smirked and strode toward her. "You ever fired one of these before?" he asked, handing her the M24. His tone carried a mix of curiosity and teasing superiority. Emma only nodded, her expression neutral. She didn't answer verbally, because words were unnecessary. Actions would speak for her. Around her, the other recruits laughed, elbowing each other as they loaded magazines and adjusted scopes. They whispered behind their hands, casting glances at the quiet newcomer. Most were loud, brash, trying to assert themselves with bravado and exaggerated confidence. Emma didn't care. She had learned long ago that confidence without precision was meaningless. Her mind replayed a memory from Montana, years earlier. The wilderness, the endless sky, the sound of a distant rifle report echoing across the pines. Her grandfather had trained her there, Jack Hawk Harlow, whose reputation as a sniper still haunted military legends. Hawk always said, she murmured to herself under her breath, "Discipline beats talent when talent isn't prepared." No one heard her, of course, but that was fine. She didn't need an audience. Blake raised his brow, unconvinced. "All right, rookie. Let's see what you've got," he said, gesturing toward the target line. Around him, other recruits fumbled with their rifles, anxious and sweaty. He chuckled at a young man struggling to load his magazine. "Relax, you'll get used to it," Blake said. Emma took her position at the firing line, her boots firm on the gravel, her breathing controlled. She didn't fumble. She didn't rush. The targets were set, standard bullseyes at various distances, with one moving target swinging across the far end of the range. The other recruits began their practice, spraying bullets wide, muttering excuses with each miss. Emma watched, her mind empty of distraction, focusing only on the fundamentals drilled into her by Hawk. She thought about stance, wind, breathing, trigger pressure. Every detail mattered. She raised the rifle, placed her eye to the scope, and exhaled slowly. One round, one breath, one perfect shot. The rifle cracked through the air, and the bullet struck dead center. Silence fell for a fraction of a second, as if the range itself had stopped. Emma reloaded seamlessly, firing again. Another perfect bullseye. Then another. The other recruits stared, unsure if it was luck. Blake's smirk faltered. Something about her stance, her rhythm, the way her fingers squeezed the trigger. It was too deliberate, too practiced. A whisper traveled through the line. Did she just... Emma didn't notice. She continued shooting, each round a demonstration of precision and calm mastery. She could almost hear Hawk's voice, a ghostly echo guiding her through the motions. Focus on the target. Breathe. Wait. One bullet can tell the story. The men around her began shifting uncomfortably, exchanging uneasy glances. The bravado that had filled the range moments ago was fading, replaced by curiosity, confusion, and awe. One recruit muttered, "No way, she's a rookie." Blake's expression was unreadable, a mixture of skepticism and dawning realization. He tried to maintain control. "Moving targets now," he barked. Emma nodded, her attention unbroken. As the target began swinging left to right, she adjusted her scope, calculating wind and distance. One shot clean. Another, dead center. The others missed repeatedly. She wasn't just accurate. She was art in motion, a ghost weaving through the chaos of inexperienced shooters. Finally, after 10 rounds, she lowered her rifle. Not a word had passed her lips. Not a hint of pride. Only the quiet satisfaction of doing exactly what she had trained to do years in advance. Blake approached, his voice quieter now, tinged with both disbelief and respect. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Emma's lips curled into a faint smile. "My grandfather," she said simply. "Jack Harlow." Blake froze, recognition flashing across his face. "Hawk Harlow? The Vietnam sniper?" She nodded, and for a moment, the loud, chaotic world of Fort Benning seemed to hold its breath. Around them, recruits whispered, still staring at the quiet figure who had just stunned everyone on the line. Emma didn't need their admiration. She only needed to honor the lessons Hawk had taught her: patience, discipline, precision. One bullet could tell the story, and she had just begun. As the sun climbed higher, burning the dust of the firing range into a haze, Emma lowered the rifle and glanced at the distant targets. She knew this was only the beginning. Fort Benning was a crucible, and here she would prove that legacy and skill weren't inherited. They were earned, honed, and perfected. Somewhere in her mind, she could almost hear Hawk's gravelly voice. "Let them talk. Let them doubt. One day, your bullet will speak louder than words." And in that quiet moment, amid the noise and chaos of rookies fumbling, Emma Harlow prepared herself. She would not just fire a bullet. She would tell a story. One shot at a time. The night before she shipped out to Fort Benning, Emma Harlow had lain awake under the dark Montana sky, listening to the soft whistle of wind through the pines. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the earthy scent of wet leaves and pine needles. It was a quiet night, one of those rare, sacred evenings where the wilderness spoke in whispers, and the world outside seemed a distant memory. It was also the night she thought of her grandfather, Jack Hawk Harlow, and all he had taught her, lessons more valuable than any medal or promotion. Hawk had been a ghost on battlefields, a man whose name alone struck both respect and fear into the hearts of soldiers and enemies alike. He had served in Vietnam as a sniper of near mythical skill, known for his patience, his discipline, and one impossible 1,200-yard shot that became legend. The story of that shot was told in military academies, repeated in hushed tones by trainees studying the art of marksmanship. Most soldiers knew the legend, few had ever met him, and even fewer understood the mind behind the rifle. Emma had been one of the lucky few. From the age of 12, Hawk had begun training her in the wilderness. At first, it had been simple lessons: how to move silently, how to observe without being observed, how to respect the rifle as a tool rather than a weapon. "A bullet doesn't kill skill," Hawk would say, crouched beside her in a shallow creek, watching her aim at distant targets carved from wood. "A bullet tells the story of the person who fires it." By the age of 14, her training had become intense. Mornings were spent tracking deer or elk through forests so dense that a human could vanish in seconds. Afternoons were spent in the small range Hawk had constructed behind the cabin, learning to breathe with the wind, calculate distances, and adjust for every environmental factor: humidity, wind, angle, even the subtle tremor in one's own heartbeat. "You are not fighting the enemy," Hawk reminded her once, squinting through his own scope. "You are fighting your mistakes, your hesitation, your pride. Everything else is secondary." He taught her the art of patience. Days could pass in silence, waiting for the perfect shot at a moving target. Hawk never raised his voice, never showed anger. His instructions were short, precise, and carried the weight of experience. Emma learned to anticipate, to move without sound, to observe the tiniest detail: a leaf trembling in the wind, a shadow shifting across the ground, a distant movement that might indicate danger. Every lesson was a step toward mastery, every mistake a step toward humility. The most crucial lesson Hawk drilled into her was not about bullets, but about control. "Do not fire until you are ready," he would say, his weathered face close to hers. "A shot wasted is more than a missed target. It is a piece of yourself you can never get back." She remembered a cold morning when they had been crouched in a tree line, watching a deer graze at 500 yards. Her finger itched on the trigger, her heart racing, and Hawk simply whispered, "Wait." The animal moved, the moment passed, and Hawk said nothing. But later, when they reviewed her breathing, her posture, and her sight alignment, she understood. The shot had not been about speed. It had been about precision. When Hawk passed away, Emma had been 17. The loss had been a quiet devastation. She remembered the smell of the cabin, the cold Montana wind, the way the rifle had felt in her hands, and the echo of his final words: "Carry the discipline. Emma, let the rifle tell the story your voice cannot." She packed his notes, his old scopes, and his journal, a small leather-bound book filled with sketches, measurements, and cryptic reminders. It became her manual, her guide, her connection to the legend that had raised her. By the time she enlisted, Emma had already learned what most recruits would never understand in a lifetime. She knew the patience required for a single shot, the humility required to accept mistakes, and the focus needed to act under pressure. She understood the rifle not as a weapon, but as an instrument, one that demanded respect and offered clarity. At Fort Benning, that clarity would set her apart, though she doubted anyone would see it at first. Her first days on the range had confirmed her suspicions. Loud, boastful recruits filled the air with noise and energy, but their skill was uneven, sloppy. Emma had watched, analyzed, and waited for her moment. When she had finally lifted the rifle, fired, and achieved the impossible, she hadn't done it to impress anyone. She had done it because every lesson Hawk had ever given her demanded execution. Every shot was a tribute, a silent nod to the man who had trained her. Even in her quiet, controlled movements, Emma felt the eyes of Sergeant Blake and the other recruits on her. She noticed the whispers, the curiosity, the disbelief. Some of the men had begun to sense that she was not merely talented, she was extraordinary. But Emma did not speak, did not boast. She allowed the bullets to communicate what her words could not: discipline, skill, legacy. Her mind briefly wandered to Hawk's old advice: people will doubt you, underestimate you, try to distract you. Let them. When the bullet hits the target, their opinion is irrelevant. Only your precision matters. She smiled faintly to herself, recalling a day in Montana when Hawk had made her wait 2 hours to take a single shot at a target the size of her palm. That day had taught her more about patience and resilience than any competition ever could. The truth was, Emma felt alive on the range in a way few soldiers did. The quiet, almost meditative focus required to line up a perfect shot was addictive. The world fell away. The sweat, The heat, the noise, the judgment of others. There was only the rifle, the target, and the faint whisper of her grandfather's teachings guiding her hand. But with her skills came responsibility. Emma understood what it meant to wield power accurately, and she also understood the danger of underestimating someone because of appearances. She was slight, quiet, and unassuming, exactly the way a sniper should appear. Those who looked down on her, who laughed or whispered, would soon learn the truth. And when they did, they would understand that the most dangerous people were not the loudest, but the silent and prepared. Her first weeks at Fort Benning would be remembered for many things, but the memory she intended to preserve was the way she had moved through the chaos with calm precision. Each bullet fired was a lesson realized, a tribute executed. She could almost hear Hawk's gravelly voice in her mind. Discipline is invisible until it speaks. Let it speak, Emma. Let it speak. As she walked away from the range that day, the weight of her rifle against her shoulder felt like a promise. She would honor Hawk's teachings not by boasting, but by demonstrating skill when it mattered most. Every shot would carry the weight of his legacy. Every movement would reflect his discipline, and every decision she made on the battlefield or in training would be guided by his unwavering philosophy. Emma knew her journey had just begun. Fort Benning was a crucible designed to test the weak and refine the strong. She was ready for the challenge. She had the lessons of a legend, the patience of the wilderness, and the focus of someone who had learned the art of observation long before she ever set foot in uniform. That night, she lay in the barracks, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the distant laughter of other recruits settling in. She thought of Montana, of Hawk, of every lesson etched into her memory. One day, someone would witness the results of that training, and when they did, they would know without a doubt. Emma Harlow was not just a soldier. She was the embodiment of a legend, and her bullets would tell the story that her voice never could. The morning air at Fort Benning was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of gunpowder and freshly churned dirt. Emma adjusted the strap of her M24, the rifle snug against her shoulder. Today was her first formal evaluation, and the instructors had set up a series of tests to push recruits to their limits. Static targets, moving targets, timed sequences, and an obstacle course designed to mimic battlefield chaos. Around her, other recruits shifted nervously, muttering under their breath, trying to mask the tension with bravado. Sergeant Blake's voice cut through the hum of preparation. All right, rookies. Eyes forward. Let's see who's got the precision and who's just talking. He glanced at Emma briefly, a flicker of curiosity in his gaze, but said nothing. Most of the recruits laughed, adjusting their scopes, tossing around careless jokes about who would dominate the course. Emma ignored them all. She had no interest in fitting in. Her focus was singular. Perform exactly as Hawk had trained her. The first round was simple enough. Stationary bullseyes at various distances. The men ahead of her fumbled, each shot scattering to the left or right. Some cursed under their breath, others shrugged and tried again, flustered. Emma stepped up, crouched low, and adjusted her breathing. Inhale, exhale, sight the target. The first shot cracked through the air, striking dead center. The second, the third. Every round landed like clockwork. A low murmur ran through the ranks. Sergeant Blake's smirk faded into a furrowed brow. Not bad for a rookie, he muttered, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. Emma's expression remained neutral. She did not bask in praise. She never had and never would. Her satisfaction came from executing each shot correctly, the way Hawk had drilled it into her, not from the approval of strangers. The next test was moving targets. Blake raised his voice. Targets are moving left to right. You've got 5 seconds to fire 3 shots. Don't miss. Most recruits went first, their bullets scattering wildly. Panic spread like wildfire, the strain of timing, wind, and distance proving too much for inexperienced hands. Emma crouched, adjusting her scope, calculating distance and speed in a way only instinct and training could allow. She waited, letting the target come closer, then farther, gauging speed with the faintest flicker of her eyes. Breath held, finger steady. The first shot fired, perfect. The second flawless. The third dead center. Silence. Not a whisper, not a stir, except for the faint hiss of wind over the range. The recruits blinked, some frozen in disbelief, some trying to deny what they had seen. Blake, however, could not hide his astonishment. Her form, her breathing, her focus, everything screamed professional. Not a rookie, not someone with casual training. Someone had taught her well. Someone legendary. Whispers spread. Who is she? One muttered. No way she's a rookie. Emma ignored it. Let them speculate. She had learned long ago that the world underestimated quiet, unassuming people. Hawk had drilled it into her. Let the bullet do the talking. Words were weak. Results were strong. The instructors moved on to the next challenge. A timed obstacle course combined with shooting. Recruits would sprint across uneven terrain, duck behind cover, and fire at targets while navigating simulated battlefield conditions. Chaos erupted as the first group ran, clumsily scrambling over logs, tripping on roots, missing their shots entirely. Emma watched, memorizing the errors, noting patterns, observing the wind and obstacles. When her turn came, she moved with purpose, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. The first target popped up. She fired, clean hit. She vaulted over the first log, keeping her balance, adjusting her scope mid-motion. Another shot, dead center. Then a third, against a moving target partially obscured by cover. Every shot landed. Every movement was precise. The spectators, recruits, and instructors alike were mesmerized. Blake's voice carried over the course. How the hell? He shook his head, eyes narrowing. He could feel the presence of something extraordinary, something he hadn't anticipated. The whispers became louder among the recruits. She's not human, one muttered, laughing nervously. Another muttered, it has to be luck. But the rhythm, the discipline, the calm control, it wasn't luck. Emma didn't stop. She moved through the course as if it were second nature. Her grandfather's lessons guided her, each command he had ever given playing back in her mind like a soundtrack. Control your breathing. Measure the wind. Watch the shadows. Wait. The voice was faint but unmistakable. Every step, every shot, every micro-adjustment was a tribute to Hawk's teachings. By the time she finished, the course was silent. Even the loudest, most confident recruits were frozen, their chests heaving, eyes wide with disbelief. Emma lowered the rifle carefully, as if handling a sacred object. She hadn't looked around. She hadn't reacted to anyone's awe or disbelief. She didn't need to. She had done exactly what she came to do. Blake approached cautiously, keeping his voice steady, though his mind raced. Where did you learn to shoot like that? He asked, finally breaking the quiet. Emma looked at him, calm and composed, and replied, My grandfather. Jack Harlow. Recognition hit Blake immediately, his jaw tightening. The Hawk? He thought. The Vietnam sniper? The legend? He could hardly believe it. The story, the myth, it was right in front of him, alive and breathing, in the form of this quiet, unassuming young woman. Whispers ran through the base. Recruits speculated, some in awe, others in doubt. A few tried to argue that lineage didn't guarantee skill, but anyone with eyes and experience could see the truth. She had been trained by someone extraordinary, and her precision, patience, and discipline were unmatched. That evening, as Emma cleaned her rifle with meticulous care, she reflected on the day. Each shot had been perfect, each movement calculated, each instinct in line with the lessons Hawk had passed down. She wasn't performing for anyone else's recognition. She wasn't performing to prove herself. She was performing because that was what Hawk had taught her. Every bullet told a story. Every shot honored her grandfather's legacy. Back in the barracks, other recruits whispered in hushed tones. Some stared at her with awe, others with envy. The rumor of Hawk Harlow's granddaughter spread like wildfire. But Emma remained silent, letting the skill speak louder than words ever could. She knew that respect had to be earned, and she had only just begun. Later that night, lying on her bunk under the thin barracks blanket, she stared at the ceiling. Her mind wandered to Montana, the cold mornings, the quiet forests, the sound of distant wildlife. She remembered Hawk's lessons, his calm, unwavering voice guiding her through every move. Discipline beats talent when talent is unprepared. Wait, observe, shoot when the time is right. She smiled faintly, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence in her memory. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But she was ready. She had the lessons, the patience, and the focus. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that one day, someone would finally understand the full extent of her skill. When that day came, they would see not a quiet rookie, but a living testament to a legend. And she would let one bullet tell the story. The following morning dawned gray and humid, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Word of Emma Harlow's performance on the range had already spread like wildfire through Fort Benning. Recruits whispered in hushed tones as they gathered for the next round of evaluations. Some stared at her with awe, some with envy, and a few skeptics crossed their arms, muttering that luck could not explain perfection. Sergeant Blake, however, remained silent, his mind racing. He had seen precision before, but what he had witnessed yesterday was something else entirely. Something almost impossible. Emma arrived at the firing line with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. Her dark braid swung lightly against her back as she adjusted the strap of her M24. She did not smile, did not engage in idle chatter. The other recruits tried to gauge her temperament, attempting casual conversation, throwing half-hearted jokes her way. She ignored it all. She didn't need friends here. She needed focus. The first test of the day was a series of moving targets at varied distances. Unlike yesterday, these targets would pop up unexpectedly, simulating the chaos of an unpredictable battlefield. The recruits tensed, rifles ready, eyes narrowed. One by one, they took their shots, the results ranging from sloppy to nearly adequate. The whispers of doubt and frustration grew louder as the targets shifted erratically. Emma's turn came. She crouched, her boots pressing lightly into the dirt, her breathing steady, her eyes scanning the line of targets. She measured wind speed with a subtle tilt of her head, accounted for humidity, and calculated distance instinctively. She had trained for this in the Montana wilderness. For years, Hawk had forced her to take shots at moving animals, at targets hidden in brush, adjusting for every environmental variable. The first target appeared. Emma fired. Dead center. The second moved faster. She adjusted for speed, fired again. Perfect. A third popped up, partially obscured by a wooden barrier. She waited, holding her breath, then fired. The bullet split the target perfectly. Not a word passed her lips. Around her, the recruits blinked, unsure whether to gasp or remain silent. Even Sergeant Blake, standing a few meters away, shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't possible for a rookie," one recruit muttered, glaring at her with a mix of envy and suspicion. Blake remained quiet, his mind racing. Hawk Harlow's granddaughter. The thought repeated over and over, each time stirring a mixture of awe and apprehension. He had studied Hawk's legend for years, analyzed his techniques, watched old videos of his historic shots. And now, in front of him, was the proof. Someone who moved and thought like Hawk himself. His techniques manifest in flesh and bone. The second stage of evaluation involved rapid-fire shooting from varied positions, standing, kneeling, and prone, under timed conditions. The recruits shuffled nervously, fumbling magazines, muttering curses under their breath as the clock ticked down. Emma approached her firing station, methodical as ever. She crouched briefly, scanned the wind, and began firing. Shot after shot, she remained flawless. Standing target, dead center, kneeling, dead center, prone, dead center. Each shot landed with surgical precision. The instructors, scribbling notes furiously, exchanged stunned glances. The recruits, once confident, now seemed dwarfed by her performance. Some whispered, "She's not human. It has to be luck." But to anyone with even a modest understanding of marksmanship, it was clear this was mastery, honed over years, guided by someone extraordinary. Blake approached her quietly, leaning down slightly to be heard over the range. "You make it look effortless," he said, voice low. Emma's eyes met his briefly. "I was trained well," she replied. She did not elaborate, but the implication was unmistakable. The final test of the day was the most challenging yet. A combination of moving targets, timed sequences, and a short obstacle course designed to simulate a chaotic combat environment. The other recruits went first, scrambling over logs, tripping on uneven terrain, fumbling with their rifles, and missing targets under pressure. Their frustration mounted, and some openly grumbled that the tests were impossible. Emma approached the course. She crouched, shifted her weight, and began moving with the quiet efficiency of a predator. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. She navigated the obstacles without hesitation, adjusting her stance and balance for each challenge. The targets moved, popped up, and vanished, but her shots never faltered. Dead center after dead center. By the time she finished, a stunned silence fell over the range. Not a word, not a single mutter, except for the distant hum of wind and the faint rustle of leaves. Blake stepped forward, finally allowing his astonishment to show. "I've never seen anything like that," he muttered, shaking his head. Whispers of awe and disbelief spread among the recruits. "Who is she?" one asked. "No way a rookie can shoot like that." Another said, "I don't care what she's trained in. That's impossible." Emma cleaned her rifle methodically afterward, the movements practiced and precise. She did not look around. She did not bask in attention. Her satisfaction came from execution, from honoring Hawk's teachings. Every shot was a tribute, a testament to years of discipline, patience, and relentless practice. Later that evening, as the recruits settled into their bunks, whispers of Emma's performance continued. Some doubted, some admired, some envied. But no one could deny the truth. She was different. She was precise, calm, and unyielding, her skills clearly honed by someone legendary. The rumor of Hawk Harlow's granddaughter spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the base by nightfall. Blake remained thoughtful. He had been a soldier for years, trained countless recruits, and yet he had never seen anything like this. Her skill was uncanny, almost supernatural in its precision. But Blake had also fought alongside people like Hawk, the rare few whose talent seemed otherworldly, honed to perfection. He knew that Emma wasn't lucky. She was trained. She was disciplined. She was prepared. That night, lying on her bunk, Emma stared at the ceiling, reflecting on the day. Every shot had been executed flawlessly, every movement measured. The lessons from Montana, the echoes of Hawk's voice, The years of patient training, it had all culminated in today's performance. She felt a quiet pride, not from attention or praise, but from the knowledge that she had honored her grandfather's legacy. Discipline speaks louder than words, Hawk had said. Today it had spoken. And Emma knew the story was only beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more tests, and greater scrutiny. She was ready. She had the training, the focus, and the calm precision that came only from years of meticulous instruction. And somewhere deep inside, she felt Hawk's presence guiding her, whispering, "Let them watch. Let them doubt. Your bullets will tell the story they cannot ignore." The base was alive with whispers, speculation, and quiet amazement. Recruits debated whether she was lucky, blessed, or simply skilled beyond belief. But Emma remained untouched by gossip. She moved with quiet purpose, guided by discipline, patience, and legacy. She had learned to let her actions speak, and the results today had spoken volumes. As she closed her eyes, drifting toward sleep under the thin barracks blanket, she visualized the range, the moving targets, the wind, the bullet's perfect flight path. She imagined Hawk's approval, silent but unmistakable, and the subtle pride in his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready. Every bullet, every shot, every movement would tell a story. The story of a quiet rookie whose skill was born from the teachings of a legend. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, private smile. The story had begun. The rumor had spread faster than wildfire. By the following morning, almost every recruit on Fort Benning had heard whispers of the quiet girl who could hit any target with deadly accuracy. Emma Harlow's name passed through dormitories, mess halls, and even the training offices, often accompanied by incredulous laughter, awe, or disbelief. "She's Hawk Harlow's granddaughter," some muttered. "No way, that's real." Others scoffed, unwilling to believe that such precision could belong to someone so young, so unassuming. But the evidence was everywhere. Perfect scores, flawless runs through obstacle courses, and a calm demeanor that betrayed no hint of nerves. Sergeant Blake had seen it all firsthand. Standing at the range, notebook in hand, he tried to suppress his astonishment. He had been a soldier long enough to recognize extraordinary skill when he saw it. Yet what Emma displayed went beyond anything he had ever witnessed. He had trained hundreds of recruits in marksmanship, yet her precision, control, and composure were in a league of their own. He couldn't ignore the fact that her movements, breathing, and timing mirrored the legendary techniques of Hawk Harlow himself. He approached her quietly as she cleaned her rifle after the morning session. "You've changed the standard today," he said, voice low, almost incredulous. Emma looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with calm hazel eyes. "I was trained," she replied simply, her tone neutral. Blake leaned back, shaking his head. "Trained? By whom?" She hesitated only for a heartbeat, then answered, "My grandfather, Jack Harlow." Recognition hit Blake like a punch to the chest. Hawk Harlow, the man whose name was synonymous with deadly precision and patience. The legend who had made a 1,200-yard shot during Vietnam, whose techniques were still studied in sniper schools across the country. And now, the living proof of his legacy stood before him. That explains a lot," Blake muttered, still in disbelief. Meanwhile, Emma's peers were beginning to notice. Some admired her skill, some resented it, and some were simply puzzled. Many had assumed the stories were exaggerated, yet the evidence was undeniable. Each perfect shot, every flawless performance, left them whispering and questioning their own abilities. For the first time in their training, the recruits encountered someone who operated on a completely different level, someone whose skill demanded recognition. The next evaluation involved a moving target course combined with high-pressure timing. The instructors set up obstacles, rotating barriers, and multiple targets at varying distances. The recruits had to sprint across uneven terrain, dive behind cover, and fire accurately within seconds. Most stumbled, missing targets, tripping, or fumbling with their rifles. Panic replaced confidence, and the sound of repeated missed shots filled the air. Emma approached the course with her usual quiet focus. She crouched low, boots firm, and surveyed the obstacles with an analytical eye. Each target, each wind shift, each step had already been mentally calculated. She moved fluidly, vaulting over logs, rolling behind barriers, and firing with uncanny precision. Each shot hit the center of the target. Every move was clean, controlled, and efficient. Even Sergeant Blake, standing at the edge of the course, could hardly tear his eyes away. By the end of the exercise, silence had fallen over the range. The other recruits stared in disbelief. How is that possible? One whispered. Another muttered, "She's not human." A few tried to dismiss it as luck, but the repetition of perfect shots, coupled with her calm control under stress, left little room for doubt. Blake approached her afterward, still processing what he had seen. "Do you even realize what you've done today?" he asked. Emma looked up, expression neutral, and replied, "I did what I was trained to do." Blake shook his head, a mixture of admiration and awe crossing his face. "Hawk would be proud," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. The afternoon brought a new challenge: precision shooting under simulated combat conditions. Targets moved unpredictably, obstacles blocked lines of sight, and timed sequences added pressure. The recruits attempted the exercise, struggling to maintain composure and accuracy. Emma, as always, moved with calculated calm. Each step, each shot, reflected years of deliberate practice. Her grandfather's lessons guided her hand, teaching her not only how to aim, but when to fire. The rifle became an extension of herself, a tool for discipline and control rather than mere destruction. By the time the sun began to set, Emma's reputation had solidified. The base buzzed with speculation. Some recruits spoke in hushed reverence, others in envy, and a few openly admitted they had underestimated her. Blake, however, remained contemplative. He had spent decades in the field, and he recognized the rarity of what he had witnessed. Emma Harlow wasn't just a skilled marksman. She was the living embodiment of a legend. That evening, Blake requested a private meeting with her in the instructor's lounge. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded, studying her carefully. "Emma, you need to understand something," he said. "Most recruits will never reach the level you just demonstrated. They'll never understand the discipline, the patience, or the focus it requires. You're something else." Emma nodded quietly, not needing to elaborate. Her grandfather's lessons had prepared her for recognition, but also for the skepticism that inevitably accompanied it. Blake continued, his voice steady but intense. "People will start talking about you. They'll speculate, they'll doubt, they'll try to compete or compete against you. Don't let them distract you. Remember your training. Remember your grandfather. One bullet tells the story, Emma. One bullet." She smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement of the wisdom he was echoing from Hawk himself. As the night deepened, Emma lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. The barracks were quiet, save for the distant hum of fans and the occasional murmur of recruits whispering in disbelief about her performance. She reflected on the day, the precision, the focus, the reactions of those around her. She thought of Montana, of the wilderness, of the lessons Hawk had drilled into her. Discipline, patience, observation, control, they had all led to this moment. In that quiet reflection, she understood something deeper. Recognition was only a small part of the story. The real reward was mastery, the ability to perform under pressure, to remain calm and focused when others faltered. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was a reflection of her discipline, a testament to Hawke's teachings, and a tool to shape the world with precision and control. She knew challenges would only grow harder. The army would push her further, test her limits, and expect results under increasingly difficult conditions. But she was ready. Every shot, every movement, every calculation had been honed to perfection. Her grandfather's lessons were now a living, breathing part of her, guiding her actions and sharpening her instincts. By the next morning, the rumor of Hawk Harlow's granddaughter had reached every corner of Fort Benning. Some recruits approached her cautiously, some with awe, some with envy. Sergeant Blake had a quiet pride in seeing the legend continue, but he also knew the weight that rested on her shoulders. Emma Harlow was no longer just a rookie. She was a symbol of discipline, precision, and the legacy of a legendary sniper. And somewhere, deep in the forests of Montana in her memories, Hawke's voice whispered again, "Let them talk, let them doubt. Your bullets will tell the story they cannot ignore. Precision speaks louder than words. Always remember that, Emma." With that, she drifted into sleep, ready for the challenges to come. Tomorrow would demand more. But Emma Harlow was prepared, and the legend she carried would continue to unfold, one perfect shot at a time. The sun rose over Fort Benning, painting the barracks and training grounds in a golden haze. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, though the air was thick with the tension of anticipation. Today was no ordinary drill. It was the first public evaluation for advanced marksmanship, one that would determine which recruits would be fast-tracked for elite training programs. The instructors had set up an intricate series of challenges, moving targets at multiple ranges, timed obstacle courses, and complex sequences designed to test both speed and precision under pressure. Recruits arrived early, adjusting scopes and whispering nervously. The rumor of Emma Harlow's extraordinary abilities had spread like wildfire, leaving a trail of skepticism, awe, and envy. Some tried to dismiss her as lucky, others as hype, yet almost everyone was silently anxious to see if the stories were true. Sergeant Blake observed from the sidelines, notebook in hand, carefully noting not only her skill, but the reactions of those around her. He could sense the subtle shift in atmosphere whenever Emma took the line. The quiet gravity she carried commanded attention without a word. The first stage involved stationary targets at varying distances, with strict time limits. Recruits fumbled with scopes and magazines, their movements jerky with tension. Emma stepped forward calmly, adjusting the strap of her M24. She crouched, eyes scanning the targets, noting wind, distance, and humidity, variables most rookies couldn't even perceive. Breath held, she fired the first shot, dead center. The second, third, and fourth were all perfect. Not a single shot missed. The other recruits stared, some with disbelief, others with envy. One whispered, "There's no way she's a rookie." Another muttered, "It's impossible." Blake shook his head subtly, impressed. He had trained many sharpshooters, but Emma's precision, poise, and focus were beyond comparison. Next came the moving targets. These weren't just simple swings. They popped up unpredictably, moved across variable terrain, and sometimes partially obscured by barriers. The recruits took their turns, many missing their shots completely. Panic spread quickly. Feet slipped, hands trembled, eyes darted nervously. Emma crouched behind her firing line, analyzing. She could see the pattern, anticipate the motion, and calculate trajectory almost instinctively. When her turn came, she fired. One target, perfect. Another, flawless. A third, partially hidden behind a moving barrier, dead center. A faint murmur rippled through the gathered recruits. Blake narrowed his eyes. The precision, the calm, the calculated patience. It was all Hawk Harlow. She had inherited not only the skill, but the discipline, the instinct, and the mindset of a legend. The third stage combined running obstacles and rapid-fire targets. Logs, low walls, and uneven terrain forced recruits to adjust stance and aim while moving. For many, it was chaos. Misfires, tripping, dropped magazines, and missed shots dominated the early rounds. Emma approached with measured steps, her body fluid, every motion deliberate. Vaulting over a log, she dropped to her knees, fired 3 shots, all dead center, then rolled behind cover and immediately recalibrated for a moving target. Every action was seamless, precise, and almost artistic. The instructors whispered among themselves. Even seasoned observers were stunned. One officer muttered, "I've seen talent, but this is different." Another shook his head. She's a prodigy." Blake remained silent, scribbling notes but thinking only of Hawk. He had trained alongside men who could make near impossible shots. Yet this was not imitation. This was legacy incarnate. By the time Emma finished the course, the other recruits were shaken. Some avoided looking at her, unwilling to admit admiration. Others openly gawked, whispers of Hawk Harlow's granddaughter filling the air. The mood of the range had shifted. Emma's presence had become a quiet gravitational pull, drawing attention and respect without a single boast or word. The final stage was designed to push both physical endurance and precision. Recruits had to sprint across the course, fire at multiple moving targets, and calculate wind and distance with split-second timing. Most faltered under the pressure. Sweat poured, breaths came in ragged gasps, and mistakes mounted. Emma stepped up, footing light but steady, breath controlled, eyes scanning every movement. Each target approached and vanished. She was ready. Shot after shot hit the center. She moved fluidly through obstacles, adjusting her aim mid-stride, her hands steady even under exhaustion. Observers whispered. Officers exchanged incredulous glances. Blake watched, knowing fully that Emma was not merely talented. She was prepared for something far greater than this range, something beyond anything most could imagine. When the final bell rang, the silence was deafening. Emma lowered her rifle, expression calm, and without a single word had left a room full of seasoned officers and recruits stunned. Some applauded hesitantly. Others simply stared. Even the harshest skeptics could not deny what they had seen. Later, as the recruits debriefed, a group of her peers approached, curiosity mixed with envy. How do you do it?" one asked, voice trembling slightly. Emma looked at them, calm but unwavering. "I was trained well," she said simply. The words were quiet, but carried the weight of experience, discipline, and legacy. It was all they needed to know. By evening, Sergeant Blake called her aside. He was quiet, measured, but a rare smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Emma, you need to understand something," he said. "They don't just respect you because you hit the target. They respect precision, discipline, control, and you've shown them all 3. That's rare. That's Hawk Harlow level rare." Emma's lips curved faintly. "I do what I was trained to do," she replied. Blake nodded. "I know. But the world out there, the real battlefield, won't just hand respect to skill. You'll have to earn it again and again. And people will test you. You're going to need focus, patience, and control at levels you've never experienced." Emma nodded. She didn't need lectures. She already understood. Hawk's voice echoed in her mind, repeating lessons drilled into her from Montana. Discipline speaks louder than words. Every bullet tells a story. Wait. Observe. Shoot when the time is right. That night, lying on her bunk, Emma reflected on the day. Each shot she had taken had been perfect, But the true lesson wasn't in the perfection of the bullets. It was in the patience, observation, and unwavering discipline that guided them. She understood now more than ever that Hawk's legacy wasn't just skill. It was the mindset, the control, and the quiet confidence to let your actions tell the story. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a connection to her grandfather's voice, guiding her silently, approving of her composure and precision. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new observers, and new tests, perhaps harder than anything she had faced yet. But Emma was ready. Every bullet, every shot, every movement had been honed to perfection. She closed her eyes, imagining the Montana forests, the quiet mornings, the distant echo of a perfect rifle shot through the pines. Hawk had always told her, "Your bullets will speak louder than your voice." Precision, patience, and control, that is everything. And today, the story had begun to unfold in ways even she hadn't anticipated. By the end of the night, the base buzzed with discussion. Some recruits were inspired, some intimidated, some skeptical. But Sergeant Blake knew the truth. Emma Harlow was no ordinary recruit. She was a living legacy, a sniper trained by a legend, and a force that demanded recognition. And somewhere, beneath the Montana skies of memory, Hawk Harlow's quiet approval echoed, "Let them watch. Let them doubt. One bullet tells the story they cannot ignore." Emma smiled faintly, her calm presence hiding the quiet pride she felt. The story was only beginning. The air at Fort Benning was heavy with tension that morning, sharper than any drill they had faced so far. Word of Emma Harlow's skill had spread beyond the basic recruits. Even advanced instructors and officers from elite units had come to witness the prodigy in action. Whispers of Hawk Harlow's granddaughter filled every hallway, and some of the most experienced trainees muttered under their breath, questioning whether anyone could truly measure up to her. Emma arrived at the firing range, M24 slung casually across her back, her dark braid swinging gently as she moved. The other recruits avoided direct eye contact. Some were awed, others simmering with envy, and a few were downright hostile. A tall, broad-shouldered recruit named Mitchell, known for his arrogance and showy marksmanship, stepped forward, his rifle dragging at the ready. "So, this is the famous Harlow," he sneered, loud enough for several recruits to hear. "Let's see if the stories are real. Hope you're not just luck and hype." Emma's hazel eyes met his briefly, calm, unwavering. She did not reply. Words had never carried as much weight as action, and she intended to prove it. The first stage of the day was a combination of long-range precision targets, some obscured by barriers and foliage. Mitchell went first, puffing up his chest, firing quickly at targets. His shots were impressive at first glance, but several missed completely, and the recoil had thrown off his alignment. Emma took her place. She crouched, measured distance and wind, and exhaled slowly. Her first shot split the bullseye. The second, third, and fourth were all dead center. Not a single target had been missed. The other recruits muttered among themselves, their whispers tense. Mitchell's face darkened, a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. The next stage was the moving target exercise, but with added complexity. Targets zigzagged, ducked behind barriers, and changed speed mid-run. Many recruits failed immediately, flustered by the pressure. Emma observed carefully, timing the movement, calculating trajectories in seconds. Each shot she fired was precise, even when adjusting for wind, speed, and cover. Mitchell tried again, but the repeated failures frustrated him. He glanced at Emma, only to see her rifle steady, finger poised, and her eyes calm. The contrast stung. His face reddened with irritation. The final stage would push everyone to the absolute limit. A timed obstacle course, combined with a rapid-fire sniper challenge. The obstacles were difficult, Logs, walls, trenches, and artificial debris littered the course. Targets appeared randomly, moving across varying distances. The course was designed to test physical agility, mental focus, and shooting accuracy simultaneously. Mitchell went first, sprinting and fumbling through obstacles. He fired rapidly, some bullets missing their mark entirely. By the time he finished, his chest heaved, sweat streaming down his face, and instructors exchanged glances. Some tried to conceal their surprise. Others muttered about how common it was for overconfident recruits to falter. Emma approached the course calmly. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. Vaulting over a log, she rolled, keeping her rifle stable. She fired 3 targets, dead center. Ducking behind a barrier, she adjusted for a moving target, partially obscured by a wall, another perfect hit. The rhythm of her movements was almost hypnotic, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. The instructor's eyebrows rose. Even the elite observers from other units leaned in, murmuring in astonishment. One whispered, "She's not just skilled. She's uncanny." Another shook his head, muttering, "This is Hawk Harlow all over again." Mitchell watched, fists clenched, disbelief etched across his face. Every flawless action Emma took contrasted starkly with his own flawed attempts. He wanted to challenge her verbally, to prove his dominance, but each perfect shot was a quiet, undeniable rebuttal. Blake, observing from the sidelines, noted the subtle reactions of everyone around her. He could see respect being forged in real time, grudgingly by some, admiringly by others. Emma was not only demonstrating skill, she was establishing a reputation that would carry far beyond the walls of Fort Benning. The final targets appeared, a sequence of 3 moving targets at varying distances, some partially concealed, all timed with precision. Emma measured wind, distance, and trajectory in a heartbeat. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. 1 shot, dead center. 2nd shot, flawless. 3rd shot, bullseye. Even the most skeptical observers were forced to acknowledge the reality. Blake finally stepped forward as she lowered her rifle. "Emma," he said, voice calm but firm, "you've done what very few can accomplish. You've proven your skill under extreme pressure, and you've done it consistently. Most importantly, you've done it with discipline, focus, and control. That's what separates a good marksman from a legend." Emma inclined her head slightly, accepting the acknowledgement quietly. Words were unnecessary. Her actions had already spoken volumes. Mitchell, unable to contain his frustration any longer, stepped forward. "This isn't fair," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "No one can compete with her." His voice carried tension, envy, and reluctant respect. Emma did not respond. She had no need to. Her performance had already made the point. The elite instructors approached, scribbling notes furiously. One officer, a grizzled veteran with decades of combat experience, shook his head. "She's exceptional. Not only the precision, but the control, the patience, the composure. I've rarely seen this at any age, let alone a recruit." Blake nodded. "Her grandfather trained her," he said quietly. The veteran's eyes widened. "Hawk Harlow? The legend?" Blake nodded again. "Exactly." The officer's expression turned to a mixture of awe and cautious respect. "No wonder. That training runs deep." By evening, the evaluation results were posted. Emma Harlow's scores were perfect across every category: precision, timing, agility, and adaptability. The notice sent a ripple through the base. Many recruits stared in disbelief, while a few rivalries simmered quietly beneath the surface. Emma had not only proved herself, she had elevated the standard, leaving no doubt that her abilities were exceptional. Later, Blake pulled her aside once more. "Emma, you faced everything the base could throw at you, and you've done it flawlessly. But this is just the beginning. Elite units, high-pressure operations, real-world scenarios. They will test you differently. And you will have to adapt, focus, and remain calm under circumstances you cannot even imagine. Are you ready for that? Emma met his gaze, steady and unwavering. I've been trained for this, she said softly, her voice calm but resolute. Blake allowed himself a faint smile. I know you have. And that's what makes you extraordinary. Remember, skill alone isn't enough. Discipline, patience, and strategy will keep you alive and dominant. Your grandfather taught you well. That night, lying on her bunk, Emma reflected on the day's events. Every obstacle conquered, every target hit, every glance of awe from instructors and peers alike, it all affirmed what she had always known. The training, the discipline, the patient repetition in Montana's wilderness had prepared her for this moment. She closed her eyes, imagining Hawk's approval, his calm voice whispering guidance, precision, patience, control. Let the bullets speak louder than your words. Always. She smiled faintly. The legacy was alive within her, and each day, each shot, each challenge would only solidify it further. Tomorrow would bring new trials, perhaps even more difficult than anything she had faced so far. But Emma Harlow was ready. She had the skill, the focus, and the discipline to face any challenge head-on. Her bullets would continue to tell the story that words could not. And for the first time, she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her place among legends was no longer just inherited. It had been earned. The dawn broke over Fort Benning like a promise. The golden light streaked across the training grounds, reflecting off rifles and polished boots. Today was the final evaluation, the crucible that would determine who among the recruits had the skill, discipline, and composure to be fast-tracked into elite sniper units. Whispers of Emma Harlow's previous performances had preceded her arrival, filling the air with tension, awe, and a subtle sense of fear among her competitors. Recruits lined up, adjusting scopes and whispering anxiously. A murmur of speculation surrounded Emma, but she moved with calm purpose, unaffected by chatter or skepticism. Sergeant Blake stood at the sidelines, notebook in hand, silently observing every step, every calculation, every flicker of her expression. He had trained thousands of soldiers, but even he had never seen this level of instinct, precision, and composure. Emma was a force beyond ordinary comprehension. The first stage tested long-range accuracy under variable wind conditions. Targets were placed at distances no ordinary recruit could master with consistency. Mitchell, still smarting from previous embarrassments, stepped forward, attempting to assert dominance. His first shots were solid, but a few missed their mark entirely. Emma's turn came. She crouched, shoulders squared, finger poised over the trigger. She exhaled, measured the wind, and fired. Shot after shot, she struck dead center. Not one miss. Whispers erupted among the recruits. Impossible? Again? One murmured. Another muttered, "She can't be real." Blake shook his head, the faintest smile forming on his lips. Emma's precision was not luck. It was years of disciplined training, honed by a legendary hand. Her bullets told a story louder than words ever could. The next stage involved moving targets at irregular intervals, some hidden behind barriers, others partially obscured by artificial terrain. Most recruits faltered immediately, fumbling and panicking as the targets darted unpredictably. Emma observed, calculating trajectory, velocity, and distance in a heartbeat. Each shot hit perfectly, even when accounting for speed, wind, and partial cover. Her control and patience left even elite observers speechless. Blake approached her quietly afterward. "Emma, this isn't just skill. This is mastery." Hawk Harlow would be proud, not just of the precision, but of the discipline, patience, and judgment. Emma nodded subtly, letting his words settle in. The final stage was the ultimate test. A combination of timed obstacle navigation, moving targets, and multiple range shooting. This course had been designed to break most recruits, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Logs, trenches, walls, and uneven terrain challenged balance and agility, while targets appeared at random, some partially concealed. Many failed in the first moments, tripping or missing their shots. Emma approached calmly, every step deliberate, every movement precise. She vaulted over logs, rolled behind walls, and fired with unerring accuracy. Her breathing was controlled, her posture fluid. Each target, moving, partially obscured, or at extreme distance, fell dead center. Even seasoned observers murmured in disbelief, exchanging glances. The realization was inescapable. Emma Harlow was extraordinary. By the time she finished, a stunned silence hung over the range. Not a word, not a cheer, just awe. The other recruits stared, some with admiration, some with envy, some in quiet disbelief. Even Mitchell, chest heaving and fists clenched, could not deny her skill. I can't compete, he muttered quietly, a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. Blake stepped forward, finally allowing his astonishment to show. Emma, you've done it, he said, voice steady but filled with admiration. You've proven that discipline, precision, and control can surpass everything else. You've earned their respect, and your grandfather's legacy lives through you. You're more than a prodigy. You're a living legend. Emma's lips curved faintly, a rare acknowledgement of pride. She did not need applause or words. Her legacy was evident in her actions, in the respect she commanded silently, and in the awe of those who had witnessed her skill. Her bullets had spoken louder than any rumor or claim could. In the following weeks, Emma's status at Fort Benning became near mythical. Recruits sought her guidance quietly. Elite instructors observed her technique closely, and officers discussed fast-tracking her into specialized sniper units. Every challenge she faced only reinforced her skill and composure. Blake remained, a quiet mentor, providing subtle guidance while allowing her training and instincts to shine. One afternoon, as she practiced alone on the range, an instructor approached. Emma, I've trained some of the best marksmen in the country, and I've never seen anything like this, he said. Your focus, patience, and execution. It's beyond training. You're a once-in-a-generation talent. Emma nodded silently, adjusting her rifle strap. She knew her skill was inherited, honed, and disciplined, but she also understood it was her choices, patience, and calm under pressure that had shaped her into who she was today. Blake watched from the sidelines, a quiet pride in his eyes. Hawk's lessons, he said softly, but adapted to you. You've taken his legacy and made it your own. Emma's gaze lingered on the targets in the distance. The forests of Montana flashed in her memory, mornings spent training, her grandfather's voice echoing. Discipline, patience, and precision. One bullet tells the story. By the time the sun set over Fort Benning, Emma Harlow had solidified her reputation. She was no longer a rookie or a recruit. She was a mark of excellence, a living embodiment of a legend, and a promise of future greatness. Recruits whispered, instructors admired, and officers acknowledged her potential for elite operations. That night, lying on her bunk, Emma reflected on her journey. Every early morning in Montana, every lesson from Hawk, every calculated shot on the range, it had all led to this moment. She understood something deeper now. True mastery was not just about hitting targets or outperforming peers. It was about control, patience, observation, and the quiet confidence to act decisively when the moment demanded it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, real-world missions, and perhaps dangers she could not yet imagine. But Emma was ready. Her grandfather's voice echoed once more. Let them watch. Let them doubt. One bullet tells the story they cannot ignore. She had learned to let her actions speak, and today, those actions had forged her legend. In the quiet of the night, Fort Benning settled into calm. Recruits slept uneasily, still processing the awe-inspiring display of skill they had witnessed. Officers discussed strategy and training adaptations. Mitchell, once boastful and dismissive, now looked at Emma with a reluctant respect. And Emma, calm and focused, drifted into sleep with the quiet satisfaction of one who had not only earned recognition, but had claimed a legacy. The story of Emma Harlow, the quiet girl trained by a legendary sniper, had begun, but her journey was far from over. Each bullet fired, each challenge faced, would continue to tell the story of a markswoman who combined inherited skill, disciplined training, and relentless focus. And somewhere, in the forests of Montana in her memory, Hawk's voice whispered approval. Well done, Emma. The world is ready to see your story.